conversation with Robin Ventura. Robin was very young, Ranger Stadium in Arlington, and did not like a pitch that he got from Nolan. Nolan's old enough to be his dad in this photo. I think he was in his 40s. Robin was in his 20s. And if you're a baseball fan, this was a wonderful moment for folks in their 40s. Now that I am, I really appreciate this. But this is what's happening. We're just fighting internally, and we've got to get past this. But the first question, I want to address here is how did we get into this mess? And so, there's been all sorts of innovation on the application side of the house. It certainly started out with Agile, the move to the cloud, which I would argue forced the need for DevOps. It has gotten even more necessary with containers. It is getting faster and faster to deploy application code changes. But when it comes to the database, nothing. And our friends over at DevOps Research Assessment, they came out with, I think it's their 5th one of these, the State of DevOps report. And this was the first year that they included the database, which is wonderful. And of course, they found that the companies that included the database in their DevOps implementation performed better than those that did not. But what does that mean? Okay, we're including this. Great. We're doing some DevOpsy stuff with the database. What does that really mean for us? And so, the bottom line is that when it comes down to it, there is a huge disconnect between the database group, and this really should be news to anybody that's on this call, on this webinar, huge disconnect between these different groups. And it goes back to the friction between development and operations. One is paid to change stuff. The other, well, frankly, change is the enemy of stability, and the other one's incented to maintain stability. So there's going to be a lot of conflict. You certainly see this being bubbles up into development teams saying, well, I'm just going to go bring in my own database flavor. And of course, when it comes time to go to production and we worry about compliance and uptime and reliability, well, we really didn't take care of that in development. There must be a place for our database professionals at the table. It is imperative that we, in this brave new world of cloud native applications and DevOps, we must have our skilled veteran database professionals weighing in on these decisions, because if we do not, and we wind up just opening it up for everyone, there's going to be all sorts of problems. We must have safeguards in place to allow for speed, but also safety. We must balance those two. And I'm not saying we have to have the whole triangle, three-sided triangle. We have good, fast, cheap, pick two. We're coming to a point in software development where all three is not only desired, but it's becoming a survival imperative. And of course, this isn't me saying this. This is Gartner. And so what this has led to is what we call a data velocity gap, where application side of the app, lowercase application side, the compiled bits, are moving very fast. And the only reason why we're seeing an uptick in database releases is because our DBAs, our architects, our ops folks that focus on the database are working longer hours. They're spending less time vetting these changes, and it's leading to an increase in errors. We've got some research on that as well. This is like putting a Tesla on wagon wheels. Sure, it'll work at maybe 5 miles an hour, but you go over speed bump, you try to hit 80, you put it in, what is it called, ludicrous mode, bad things are going to happen. And so we need to, if we're going to invest if our companies are going to invest in DevOps and spend money on these things, we need to also give them a strong foundation. And that starts at the database. That is the foundation. Anybody who tries to tell you otherwise is frankly wrong. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes from Revenge of the Sith, where, Obi-Wan and Anakin and the then Chancellor are stuck in a field and like, wait a minute, how did this happen? We're smarter than this. And we all are. Everybody on the development side of the house, the ops side of the house, all parts in between, we're smarter than this. But given the results, apparently not. And so one of the things I wanted to do was also pause at this point, and see if there's any questions, thoughts, feelings. We're going to have another couple of breaks when it comes to questions. So if anybody has questions at this point, feel free to put them in the chat window. I think we're also checking Slack as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just pause for a few moments and see if there's any questions. Don't worry, there's going to be another pause.
Not seeing any questions coming through at the moment, Robert.
Okay, fair enough. So let me be more controversial. Let's see. So we have this book at our house that's on our coffee table. Everybody has a bunch of coffee table books, right? And it's called Much Loved. And it's a great book, by Mark Nixon, where he has taken photos of kids' toys, the Lovey, and they look exactly like you would expect. At some point in this toy's life, it was, if this got left behind at a restaurant, that kid's not going to sleep until mom or dad drive over there to get it. And frankly, I'm looking at these things and I'm thinking it's a safety hazard. Only a child could love this, and it feels like at some point we started treating our databases like this. And it's gotten to a point, at least from my perspective, that we're starting to treat these, or have been treating these databases as something that is sentient almost, that has emotions. Or maybe we're tying our personal self-actualization with these databases. And one of the things that I'm going to challenge our database professionals on this webinar is that we need to get past that. We need to get past the idea that I can't let anybody touch this because I'm the only one. And if it goes wrong, then I'm the person that gets called. There's a couple problems with that. One, the fact that you're the only person or your team is the only person that can do it. And two, that you're the one that's on the hook if something changed. DevOps teaches us that, frankly, it takes a village. We're all in this. And if you're going to make a change, you're on the hook to make certain that it was the right change. Now, how did we get in this spot? And so let me, this is Imagine, the Way We Were by Barbara Streisand, is playing right now. So 1979, one of, personally, I think, the best Jackson album came out, Off the Wall. We also had the first release of the Sony Walkman. That's pretty cool, especially for any younger, Marvel Universe fans, like Guardians of the Galaxy. And we have the first release of Oracle. This was pretty cutting edge stuff. Now, of course, it was version 2. So our friends at Oracle Larry doesn't do version 1. Everything is at least a 2 or above. And this was amazing. We could use something that kind of sort of looked like natural language to find out, what are our top 10 accounts from last year? Wow, instead of having an army of people going through actual paper, we could figure this out pretty quickly. And that was cool, man. Ran on a VAX machine. But let's be honest, since, relational databases came out, we've really not had a lot of, big changes. Okay, fine. Instead of using a terminal, you can use a an editor that has syntax highlighting and those sorts of things, and you can connect from your PC. That's pretty cool. You know, we can run it in the cloud, but instead of your servers, but that's really somebody else's server, which you're renting. But 2002 comes along, and you know, in music we get Nickelback. Not very bullish on the 2000 the year music for 2002, but we also got this manifesto for agile software development, and this was a bunch of folks that you know, wore Birkenstocks, were talking crazy stuff, because who writes manifestos? Dangerous people write manifestos. And so these developers had a new way of getting software at the door. Now, of course, this caused all sorts of other problems, because when management found out they didn't have to do requirements anymore, and just software magically appeared every 2 weeks, well, we had to coach them on that, on what a story was. But this was amazing, because it really shortened our time to market on how quickly we could get features out and to course correct. Amazing. And of course here, you know, we have this picture of a DBA being invited to an Agile Scrum meeting. Once again, you know, DBAs are not invited to the party. And that was bad. That's a bad move, because what happened was development started getting faster. And we're not hiring more DBAs. We're just expecting them to, oh, well, instead of having a release every quarter or twice a year, congratulations, folks. We got to do this every 2-3 weeks now. You know, good luck. Hope it works out. Fast forward that, you know, and in the intervening years between 02 and 09, you know, we get the cloud, and also, well, Black Eyed Peas. We get this thing called DevOps. Ooh, we're going to have our DevOps teams start, you know, dev team and ops teams. It's going to be a virtuous cycle that feeds on itself, and we continue to improve. And of course, here's a picture of a you know, development team releasing SQL scripts to our DBAs. It certainly feels like this sometimes. It just never stops. And instead of moving to you know, this monolithic app that had maybe, okay, fine, one release every 2-3 weeks, we finally got it automated. Oh, now we're going to re-architect this to microservices, and now we're not going to release every 2 to 3 weeks. We just want to release one release when it's ready. Boy, does that cause problems for our DBAs. This is not sustainable, and this is exactly where you know, what is leading us to this problem of today, where we're actually asking, can we apply DevOps to the database? I believe we can. And you know, I go back to this Gibson quote, you know, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. And I can't think of a better place to show where that is happening than our database teams or database professionals adopting DevOps. They're not invited to the meetings. They're certainly not weighing in on tools. Our DevOps dev teams are hearing from vendors, oh, buy this application release automation stuff and just put the SQL scripts in. It'll be great, no problem. We need to catch up our database teams. The companies that you all work for need to catch up. And so, you know, I've got a question, you know, answers this question of, you know, why are we not doing this? Why are we not applying this? And one of my other challenges to our DBAs on this call is to get past the we've always done it that way. We need to change. We need to adopt. We need to adapt, evolve, overcome. We need to get better. But I just wanted to talk about other things that we've always done and we got rid of. So leeches, bloodletting, we've stopped that a while ago. Asbestos, yeah, that was a wonder material. Unfortunately, it just caused minor cancer. And so we found other materials that are fire, not proof, but certainly retardant. Smoking, boy, that has dropped. And for all the right reasons. And certainly creating a ticket to change database schema. this is not working. We cannot have, DevOps teaches us that the ticket cannot be the API that you call to get things done. There has to be a better way. So at this point, I'm going to pause because I've said a lot of controversial things, and certainly want to be transparent and open and allow people to ask questions, make points. So let me pause here and see if there's any thoughts, especially if I'm absolutely wrong and you don't like what I'm saying. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, Nickelback, I think you're wrong about. But
fair enough. Fair enough.
In all seriousness, we do have a question, and the question is, should data architects fall under operations or development teams? And Rob wants to add the caveat, should there even be operations and development teams?
Well, I think the fact that individual asked that second question, that is the answer. We need to move. Look, everybody's familiar, or should be. Please, Google this and check out the Wikipedia page. Conway's Law, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but that is a architecture of a computer system will follow the lines of communication, will mirror the lines of communication of the company. So back in the day, and I love Martin Fowler's article where he cites this on microservices, where the reason why we had 3-tier architectures because we had the UI folks, our JavaScript, HTML, Photoshop type people. Then we had our Java developers. That was business logic. That was certainly the stuff that tied the system of record to the presentation layer. And then we had our database. And so these were 3 separate teams, and we had to organize this. And it made sense at the time. It doesn't anymore. We need, we've certainly seen the rise of the full stack developer, those sorts of things. Data architects or enterprise architect or any kind of skill set like that is, and to continue my baseball metaphor, sometimes there are left-handed batters, and there are left-handed relief pitcher specialists that come in and solve that problem. Data architects don't need to be involved in every single release. They don't need to weigh in on every release. They certainly need to have standards. They certainly need to, when it's time to refactor or initially architect a system, when we're moving from monolithic to microservices, architects should definitely have a seat at the table. Are they part of a dev team, of an ops team? I think those things go away. I think we're moving to a point where people can provision their own servers the right way. I'm not saying they can do whatever they want, but there are guardrails. So today, I do believe that there's value in dev and ops for data architects, certainly for performance, scalability for our DBAs, but also for performance of the app itself, not the servers, not the database runtime. Hopefully that answered the question. If not, ask another one. We're going to have a question period after this. Are there any other questions before I move on to the next one?
So what about shadow IT? I know, in fact, actually, before you answer that, there's a follow-up question which comes through which says, who are those guardrails? Typically, those people have a compliance and security. Let me start that again. Who are those guardrails? Typically, those people have compliance and security in mind.
Yes, and everybody should have that.
There's about 3 questions there. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go in reverse order. Okay, we're going to talk about guardrails. I believe if a company is going to adopt cloud, frankly, let me back up. I think the same standards for security should apply to all environments in the company, especially dev. Here's why. Too often, we will get to production and do a push, and the system has released in, I don't know, who knows what, but we need to open up a new port. And we didn't have that problem in dev and test and all environments in between, all the prod -X environments. because it was too hard. It was tough. It slowed us down. And so now we're stuck with a sucker's choice in production. Now we have to either A, wake somebody up and to get approval from, chief security officer, somebody, to allow that change. Or we can just say no. We can refuse to make the push and say you didn't follow the process and you need to go into the penalty box. You're naughty. Both of these are horrible decisions. All right, so one, you're making a high-risk security call way late at night. Humans are not at their best at those moments. It's a stressful situation. You're tired. This sucks. That's not the time to be in calls like that. But the other one where you just say no, well, dude, that represents all sorts of investment, and you might have partners waiting on this, customers. You might have been contractually required to do that release. Well, that's another bad choice. So if we had this in development, if we had the same security enforced in dev, then development would have found it back then and said, hey, we need to make a change, back when finding bugs and fixing them is cheap and easy. Now, I believe that these standards for applying security to a dev environment, like let's say we're doing VMs for our dev team, we're doing some kind of almost private cloud, that environment should be able to, development teams should be able to fire up and shut down their environments without requesting a ticket or something. They should just be able to do it, and they should have a menu. You like Henry Ford back in the day. You can have any color as long as it's black. All right. So hopefully it's more than one choice. But we should give them an opportunity. This is the Node.js stack that we're using. This is the Java stack. And you have this. And this is SQL Server, and it's configured for you to fire up a new instance of SQL Server. It has all of our standards in place. It's locked down. We allow you to make changes to the schema using the same tools or process that we use in other departments. Dev says, oh, well, I don't want to do a ticket. Well, fine. Then they need to be educated on what those standards are. And then this is part of bringing those database resources over, shifting left to dev. Now, what was the first one, the first question? Because that was the second one.
So yeah, and I mean, I would like to say very much that you automate as much of those things as you possibly can. And
yes.
It might be that this is the database with the PII data in it. This is dealt with in this particular fashion. But equally, no, we're not going to let you have select. We're going to use code tool to make sure that you're not putting that in. Or if you're an evil DVA like me, you'll just put a calculated column of 1 divided by 0 at the end of your tables. Please do that.
Look, at some point, and I'm looking at this audience question here, the future, CI/CD. Look, the same.
Read the whole question so that everybody could hear it. That would be great.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. The one it said. Let me read it. I'm going to skip over the part where I'm attractive and thin and very charming, which is all true. And humble. I don't think you're wrong, but how do we bring the database into the future when it comes to CI/CD, specifically unit testing, code control, static code analysis, have allowed our application teams to accelerate their work and create CI/CD pipelines? What tools exist for this on the database side? There are a number of them. My company certainly makes one, Datacle. You do CI/CD DevOps for the database, you're going to find a lot of Google AdWords. I'm certainly partial to mine, and I really try to shy away from vendor pitching on these things. But they're out there. They're not as plentiful as what we see for ARA. There's Electric Cloud, ZB Labs, Urban Code. CA might have one, doesn't have one. There's Jenkins, certainly Harness, GitLab's getting into the game as well. That's cool, man. And every single cloud provider has one as well. Amazon has Code Pipeline, Azure has VSTS, Oracle has their stuff, IBM has their stuff, But when it comes to the database, yeah, and it pains me that they're not there. So you got to check them out. There's certainly open source options as well. Our open source project is Liquibase. That's been around the longest and has the most commits, most activity. Big fan of that. But they're out there, and this is the time to start investigating those. And certainly, you can hit me up on Twitter at Robert Reeves, at Datical. Our DMs are open, and you can get in touch with us that way. We do have a PDF to distribute towards the tail end, so you guys can get some more information on this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next part. And when we start talking about, okay, fine, we're all bought in. There's a problem. We know how we got there. How are we going to fix this? And so the first thing is, well, the first one is accepting that you have a problem. It's number one, every 12-step program. But I'm doing a lot of hand waving about bringing dev and ops together and DBAs and data architects working together. This doesn't happen without trust. Remember at the beginning of this when I talked about the incentives, what each team is incented to do? One is change, one is stabilize. They're the enemies of each other. We need to get back to the point where we are all playing on the same team. We certainly have different roles. We have forwards, we have backs. Any sporting team, everybody has specialists. But at the end of the day, we're working together to become better. But this doesn't happen until we establish trust. And to get there, and what I would, because there's a large number of database folks, not as many developers on this call. This is what I would ask you to ask of your DevOps teams. Challenge them to prove, to show where this is working. Not prove it, I shouldn't say it like that. But give me examples, give me positive examples. It's like raising a child. You keep telling your kid don't, or you have bad habits, but you're doing the do as I say, not as I do. That ain't gonna work. You need positive examples. You need to scaffold their learning. You need to be a mentor. You need to be a goal that they try to reach. And you should ask those development teams, those DevOps teams, to share with you and your team where success is happening. Do it early, do it often. One of the other things is they need to speak to database professionals in their language and identify with them. What's in it for me? And this is really important because this is about empathy. And if we're trying to make a change, and if we're trying to improve our companies, everybody has something in it for them. I certainly imagine a number of database professionals are looking at things like cloud and DevOps, and it is causing some real concern about job security and those sorts of things. Now, we certainly haven't seen any DBAs lose their jobs because of them using a solution like Datical. I haven't seen it. But what we've certainly seen them do is improve their career, become more valuable to the organization. And the DevOps teams and the development teams and the folks that have not brought the database teams into DevOps land need to focus on this. When they talk to you and your team, they need to explain those WIFMs, and they need to make it clear, and they need to have some empathy. There also needs to be win-win solutions. So on one hand, you have development teams that are demanding, I should be able to just hit a button and deploy this. And our database professionals should say, well, yes, you should be able to do that because I'm tired of getting called. There is a win-win here. There was a time where DBAs actually left the office at 5. My goodness. There was a time where we, very early in the internet, websites would shut down outside of business hours. We don't do that anymore. But there was a time where we didn't always have to call DBAs every time there was a release. Just like we're not calling developers every time there's a release. We're doing automated deployments. And we should get to a point where we're doing that with the database, but we need to do it in a way that doesn't cause more work for the DBAs. That's not a win-win situation. We need to create situations where it's less work for everybody so that we can increase the number of releases, number of features we add, number of bug fixes. This is what we need to get to. And I think establishing that win-win, what's in it for me, understanding where we've had wins as an organization doing DevOps, and certainly where we've had challenges and how we've overcome them, that's about establishing trust. That's not technical though, but it's very important in doing that. And I think database administrators are right to demand that of the development team. I think it's right for a manager over in DBA land to go to a manager in development land and say, hey, you guys are doing a pretty bad job of selling this. You're demanding this, and frankly, your demeanor undermines your case. You need to change that. You need to understand what our goals are and how we can align them, and we all win together. I don't think it's wrong to demand that. I do want to point out that there is a straight up value here. Now, of course, I could have put other currencies, and I apologize for that. I know we're not all in the US, but there is just straight up money when it comes to DevOps. And I do want to share that with the database folks that are on this webinar. This is a line from the 2014 State of DevOps report. Now, it's pretty dated. Dr. Forsgren has taken this out because it was just a real pain to gather this data. But what they found, and I'm just going to read this, I'm not going to do this on all the slides, but we found that these 355 companies all outperformed the S&P 500 over a 3-year period. S&P 500, for folks that don't know, it is an index of the Standard & Poor's 500 biggest companies. It's weighted by market capitalization. And so the ones that were publicly traded that had high performing teams had a 50% higher market capitalization growth over 3 years than those with low performing IT organizations. Let me simplify this. The ones that adopted DevOps grew faster than their peers. Now, there is one individual in the entire world that has beaten the S&P 500 like that. And his name is Warren Buffett. Nobody else has done this. Folks that are money managers, hedge fund managers can't do this, okay? What this means is that we have now identified a thing, DevOps, that will allow our companies to grow faster than their peers. This is not the sales team saying this. This is not marketing. This is not the CFO saying, oh, let's have a reduction in force. Let's have layoffs, those sorts of things. Let's not buy back our stock. No, this is about the geeks, the nerds, the ones that actually know how to play Dungeons and Dragons, actually improving the value of the company. This is amazing. This is something that, if you had my friend Eric Minnick, who does DevOps over at IBM, he has a DevOps portfolio that he has personally invested money in, and he shares the results. Check it out on Twitter. And he is killing it. Imagine if somebody just had a DevOps hedge fund or mutual fund. That'd be amazing because they would kick butt. This is something that I really wanted to share with you guys so you can understand that this is about money. Yes, it's about leaving the office on time as well. It is about having more valuable conversations and enjoyable projects at work. Yes, it's all about those things. But you know what? It can also make some money. There's another value with this, and this is from Paul McNulty, who is former Deputy Attorney General in the United States. It's kind of a big deal. And his line was, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. I want you guys to just print screen on this, all right? Because this is a line that I want you to use with the development teams, the DevOps teams that are pushing you to say, oh, well, just give me the password, username, password, I'll do this, okay? You need to partner with them and help them understand that what they're suggesting is potentially very dangerous, and that you need to explore other options for automation outside of them just doing it. Deputy Attorney General McNulty here was speaking about adhering to the law and going to jail. But we've certainly seen this recently with what happened with Equifax and the fact that they didn't patch Apache struts. They don't have DevOps. They weren't able to quickly update those servers and update Apache struts. They messed up. Now, of course, the CEO of Equifax, former CEO, tried to throw that engineer under the bus. But if you read the congressional report on it, just the executive summary, just the first 2 pages, it makes it very clear that their rush to growth was not backed up with automation, with compliance enforcement, certainly with security. And so I want you to use this, that, yeah, understand the value of DevOps, but you need to help them understand the value of compliance and security and doing things the right way. At some point, we need to have a meeting of hearts and minds. We need to have a kumbaya moment. Let me talk about how we get to that before we get into the technical stuff. This is one of the things that I'm very bullish on. Never waste a crisis. Every time something goes wrong, it is an opportunity for you to look at this and say, how can we improve from it? Or also point out with, hey, guys, this is why we wanted, the database team to be with the DevOps folks. This is why we wanted to be invited to this. Oh yeah, it's you guys waited and we needed a week to review all the SQL, script changes. That is, frankly, that's your fault. I'm sorry, but we can use this as an opportunity to get better and improve. Don't be shy about using those crises to force a conversation. I certainly know that it's a pretty hot job market. In times like this, it's an opportunity to push back because it's really hard to find DBAs right now, guys. You need to certainly identify and celebrate the ideal. This is about evangelizing. And certainly there will be teams, development teams, that are easier to work with, that get it right, that know how to review their changes beforehand, that are using things for static code analysis ahead of time before they even check it in. That's valuable, and you need to use that as a positive example. And finally, appeal to the human side of things. It is, hey, dev team, boy, doesn't it really suck waiting on the database folks? Yeah, I know it's a real hassle. Well, I'm sure you're missing piano recitals and little league games and date nights and all that stuff. Boy, it sure would be great if you partnered with us earlier so that we can address these changes sooner and not treat the database as the last thing we're going to do. How about you invite us earlier? How about we shift left on this? These are the things that helps you push a point to get to the more technical stuff. Also, I want to point out that failure is good. Pain is instructive. Just don't do it the same way twice or thrice. Just don't. Figure out a way. Okay, we messed up. That's cool. What did we learn? How are we going to fix it? And this is part of DevOps, is that blameless postmortem. Okay, let's get into the concrete on how we're going to do it. Okay, the 5 ways. These are more general, points. And this is a point for our dev team. You are not done until it's in production. I would challenge leadership, and I'm talking like SVP, CIO, CTO level of your companies, because they're measuring development on how often they get a release out. Okay, well, what does that mean? What is out? Oh, we've delivered it to test. Well, great. What about production? It doesn't matter until it's in production. You know, look, there's all these goods in the warehouse and they're just wasting money. They're just sitting there. It is not done until it's in production. Until that good, which is software, is in the hands of the customer, using it in production, it is not done. So do not get rid of evaluating performance of teams based on their individual performance. Everybody that touches the code, whether they're writing it, testing it, delivering it to production, all points in between, whether it's security, whether it's network provisioning, I don't care what. If it has something to do with the software getting out to production, everybody needs to be evaluated based on the date and time it gets to production. That's when it's done. There's a lot more metrics in the State of DevOps report, and I highly recommend checking that out. Number two, we've got to get rid of tickets for database changes. There's got to be another way. Are we including them as part of the release? Do we have some kind of automation for executing these SQL changes? Do we have automation for reviewing these? These are the things that we need to do. Now, I'm not saying just get rid of it. You have to work with these teams to put this stuff in place. Our DBAs, our database professionals, database architects, the folks that are system DBAs, application DBAs, they have a wealth of knowledge stuck between their ears, and that needs to get exposed in automation, and that needs to be available to the development teams. We need to shift left on this stuff. The same mechanism by which we deploy our applications, which is moving to complete lights out automation, we should hold our database changes to that same standard. We've got to get rid of tickets. It's going to be painful, it's going to be difficult, but until that's done, we have not adopted DevOps. I would argue that development needs to start taking ownership of enforcing database standards. Whether it's naming conventions or making certain that before you add a foreign key, that the columns in that foreign key have an index previously applied. That is, SQL 101, DBA 101 stuff. And they need to start taking a larger ownership of that. They need to, just like they're taking ownership with the code that they write, if they're going to be initiating these database changes, these schema changes, these stored logic changes, they need to also take ownership that it's done correctly. The same care and feeding that goes into unit tests, into automated testing, into manual testing, all types of testing, that needs to also be applied to the database. Any change to the database. It is not ops problem. It's everybody's problem, and they need to take more ownership. And I would encourage everybody that's on this call to challenge your dev teams to do that. So what are good database standards? I don't think anybody is going to argue about these that are on this call, okay? Naughty words, all right? These are not curse words. This is things like truncate, this is not something, we want a stored procedure, truncating a temp table and not realizing that they could create a race condition for somebody else that calls that stored procedure, Look, these are the standards that DBAs hold themselves to, and I'm sure everybody has a ton more. Developers should hold themselves to this standard. Management, the company should hold them to this standard. They're working very hard on doing things like Sonar Cube for their code. Why aren't they running it against SQL scripts? Why not? Come on, guys. Come on. It's 2019. I would argue that there is a way that we can apply the lessons learned in development to the database. And so let me walk you through this pattern of dealing with microservices and how do you move somebody from an old version to a new version. And so this is the expand, migrate, contract pattern. So we've got a, we're trying to move a argument for a new class to a better argument. We're going to move it from this data clump stuff to a coordinate. Okay, cool. But we have a bunch of clients that are calling this. So the first thing we're going to do is expand. We're going to write this new version of a microservice, this new version of a class, and nobody's going to call it. And we're going to have test cases for it. And it's going to be great. Then we are going to migrate. So in here, we've got our two lower clients, so the bottom two clients, have moved to the new version. Notice we haven't gotten rid of the old version. And we're not going to contract. We're not going to get rid of it until everybody's on the new one. All right. This is a graceful way of, whether it's with Java classes or with microservices, to move people to the new version. And this works in development land. So let me give you a really bad example of how we could do this with the database. So here we have a very chuckle-headed table. Notice that name has first and last, okay? I know, we're not that chuckle-headed, but it's just an example. And so what we're going to do is we're going to split, the first name and last name, but we're still going to keep the name around. We're still going to keep that column. Maybe we use a trigger to keep them in sync, maybe not. Your mileage may vary, all right? But then using our monitoring tools, we're going to notice when the queries calling that name column and not first name and last name, and certainly we're going to be looking for select star in our queries from our dev team, or maybe they should have that as a standard. When that drops to 0, we know that we can get rid of it and we can drop that old column. We don't have to do strange and unnatural things. We can evolve our database schemas gracefully, and we can partner with our dev teams on how to do that. Maybe we have releases for the database that are actually called, well, this is a migrate. This is an expand release where we add new things. And maybe we have a migrate release where we're checking, is anybody calling that old column? And then we have a contract release where we're getting rid of it. And we only run that maybe when we get enough data that says, from our monitoring stuff, that says we can contract. This is what we need our database professionals to do, and to work with the dev team, the DevOps teams, the release team, everybody, on helping them understand that, look, we want to gracefully update and improve, and we want to leave this better than we found it. We don't want to, add more cruft and silliness to our database schemas. We want to take every change as an opportunity to get better, to be a Boy Scout, or a Scout, and to, leave it better than we found it. Let's pick up not just our garbage, maybe somebody else's. Finally, teamwork makes the dream work. I know I've been harping on this, but I just wanted to leave that rather pithy saying there, and feel free to use it, spread it around. I'm going to skip through the build because I just did a time check here. Please do a print screen on this. This is the things that I would share with our dev folks. And primarily, look, it's not a cudgel. Quit beating people about the head with it. And also, you're going to fail, developer, if you do not include your DBA team and help them adopt DevOps. For database professionals, look, we know we got to do this. That's why you guys are on this call. But you are going to fail as an individual if you don't get a seat at the table and help those dev and DevOps teams enforce database best practices everywhere. So let me sit on this one. This is some stuff that we have on getting started with database release automation, 4 easy steps. It's just 4, guys. That's it. Super easy. But let's go ahead, and I can stay late to answer questions if people want to stay on. So let me look at questions here. Oh, I need to blow this up.
Don't blow it up.
Well, expand it, I should say. Thank you.
I am uploading the PDF to the Slack channel. Just doing it extraordinarily slowly because I'm in a hotel. I would like to just ask one thing, which is the one thing I get asked a lot, which is, what about the data? We can do all of this automation. What about the data?
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of really cool tools out there, especially in the cloud, that allow you to do database virtualization. And I would frankly like to see a world where the only physical, quote unquote, physical copy of the data, the system of record, is production. And we are able to say, give me the last release that has all the data, mask it, get rid of the PII that's in there, and give that to me for dev and test purposes. Companies like Delphix do that. I certainly know that there's some new tech in Azure and AWS that allow you to do that. But I really want us to get past this, take a dump of production and shift it over. In some countries, that's actually illegal now. So let's not do that. And so it's also just bad behavior, and it takes too much. We need to provide self-service to our development and test teams so that they can fire up an environment that mirrors production. And every time they update dev, test, UAT, sit, whatever, it's against what looks like production. Now that's data from a dev test perspective. Let's say, the other dimension there is we need to move, let's say, our product catalog. All right, we need to update that. That needs to be alongside the code somehow. Now, I'm a big fan of checking things into Git. Or maybe we get it from somewhere else and it becomes an artifact that goes along with our release. Why can't we use, a drop all insert, to refresh a product catalog so that we know that it's the gospel truth? Nobody has messed with this in production. Nobody's made a change. And if they have, we're going to find out real quick and test. I think if that data is necessary for the application to run, it should be treated as an artifact and should be part of the artifact creation process and follow alongside the code, app code, and database code.
Heck yes. Yep.
What's annoying is when there's that department that oversees DML, and you have to call them, and it's like going to some dark-robed cleric asking permission, please sir, may I have the data? And that's just rude. That's just all about job security. That doesn't help the company. Sorry, I interrupted. You were going somewhere.
No, for once, I was pretty succinct, mate. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, generally, when I work with clients, they want a full copy of prod. I'm like, well, why don't we just look at the structure, and hopefully that structure of the database is in source control, and we're going to build it up, and we're going to have some static and referential data. We're going to have that in source control too. And we're going to build this out,
It's always somebody that's a little on the older side, correct?
Oh, yeah.
This is somebody that first job was with a terminal green screen, and I would argue that, the folks that maybe are they themselves are cloud native. You got to help the old folks. You got to help them understand,
Yeah, and
Take them by the
absolutely.
hand, help Meemaw and Peepaw, figure out how to, do Snapchat. Take them by the hand.
Oh my goodness.
And say, no, we're not taking a dump of production. We're not doing that, Grandpa.
Well, one of the ways I got around that was I brought up a green screen and I showed Mr. Senior DBA, and I mean senior in years, how easy it was to commit using Git commands, 4 of them. And I said to him, you live in T-SQL. You were one of the best T-SQL guys I've ever met. This is just another script, and it's going to save your job and my job.
Yeah.
And, I brought up a command window and I said, go for gold.
Yeah.
I think
thank you, because that's the WIFM. What's in it for me? You were explaining to that individual, putting it in terms they could understand, what they're going to get out of it and how it's going to improve their life. And it worked. They bought it. They bought in now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think conversations I've had is they say, well, what about if we risk losing the data? And I say, well, what do you do at the moment? If you're going to rename a table or you're going to split a column, what do you do at the moment? Oh, well, we write the script and we do this. And it's like, so do that.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Do that.
Yeah. Live that thing you said.
Just do it. But instead of writing a T-SQL script and copying and pasting it into Management Studio and pressing F5, why don't we just take it over here and make sure that we do the same thing everywhere with a release script and source control? And they go, oh. And then once they see it going, okay, it's all good.
But that's evangelize. You show them, well, this is what they're doing. And then, oh, look, they're leaving the office early for an offsite. They're going out for drinks. You want to join them? Do this.
I want to get into DevOps so that I don't have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do releases.
Oh, what the thing is though, is because the types of people that are attracted to this, the geeks, the Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Lego nerds, we don't stop though. Like every time I'm on a plane and I'll see somebody checking in and they're looking at their dashboard, their release dashboard, and I see it going from yellow to green. It doesn't happen all the time, but being able to see them, and I'll lean over and say, hey, did you just do a push from 30,000 feet? That's the coolest thing, man. That is neat. They could have been on a beach.
Yep. I've released, I run a popular open source PowerShell module, and I've released it through my, I've accepted a PR, I've merged it, I've watched the build go through, I've released it into production, deployed it to PowerShell Gallery from my phone, standing in queues at airports.
It's wonderful.
And I love it.
That's the kind of life that we need to get all of our database administrators to. Frankly, shame on us for allowing it to happen. Shame on us for enabling that toxic behavior. But it's okay. We're going to fix it. But it is, it's time that we apply those lessons learned to that tier, that part of the application, because there's no reason not to. And besides, it's kind of fun.
Oh, it definitely is. It definitely is. If anybody else has got any questions, please feel free to think. There's one come up in Slack. More of a political issue than a tech one. How do you convince the DevOps team? Yes, I know having an actual DevOps team is an anti-pattern. That the DBA team wants to work with them early in the process and not just get a bunch of scripts to run at deploy time. Personally, having gone through that very recently, you go and have the conversation with them and you show them the benefits. That's literally what I did straight up.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, look, if you reach out to that team and say, hey, look, this is how long it took when we did it last time. How do you think we could maybe see it sooner? Is there, could we have like something could we start watching this? Is there a place that we could watch a directory for change in the repository that you guys are putting it? Do you have some kind of filter for your, some kind of filter for Jira that we can use? Share it with us.
Even here's the default database SQL Server installation that we use. Here are our default security patterns and our code analysis, so that when you give us the thing that you want us to release, we don't go, well, actually, no, you can't name tables like that. It doesn't. We don't store PII data in this format. We need to, whatever those rules are. Give that to them and say, right, here you go. Start the conversation. It's all about communication. Hamish, go.
Yeah, mate. I hope that this DevOps team, and look, I don't get hung up too much on names of teams. I just want to make stuff go. We can call it the giraffe team for all I care. But one of the underpinning things of the giraffe team is communication and collaboration. And one of the things I talk about is, even though we have these nice little teams all over the place, we're actually one team. And that one team is about delivering business value to our clients. And that's how we get on board. And I say to the DBA team, or, hey, do you want to find out about this change at 10 a.m. on a Monday at stand-up, or maybe a couple of weeks when the team is doing, sprint planning and all this kind of stuff? Or do you want to do the same old where you're finding out at 3 p.m. on a Friday that you have to get up in 12 hours and do it? And then I talk to the DevOps team and I say, hey, guys and girls, we've got to work together. We've got to be collaborative. We're walking the same beat. And I tell you what, it takes a week or two, mostly because I don't give up and I just keep talking. But eventually they get it, because cool thing happens. DBA looks at a change the dev team or whoever's about to do, and they're like, we could put an index on that and make it go way faster.
Yep.
The DevOps team teaches the DBA, I can talk to people more. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it's not hard, but it involves conversations and sometimes difficult conversations. But if you approach it with the right balance of empathy and putting the organization's goals ahead of yours, it will work out.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I would like to say thank you very, very much indeed. We've gotten 10 minutes or so over time, but that's fine. Conversation can carry on in the Slack channel. And I thank you very much, Robert, indeed, for coming and joining us. And hopefully we might be able to persuade you to come back and join in another one of our sessions at some point. We do like to have sort of question and answer sort of group discussion type sessions as well. And I truly think that you'd be brilliant to come in and do that.
Thank you.
Well, I would love to. And what would be really cool? I would love for any audience members that are still on, that are going to start putting this in action. I would love like a 6 months from now to get an update. We actually did it and it worked. And this is where we screwed up, and this is what we learned, and this is how we benefited. And if you showed up with metrics, woo, man, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
Excellent. Well, the broadcast was recorded. I will do my very best to get it uploaded. It won't be until the weekend when I get back to somewhere with real internet access. Again, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, man. Have a good one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.